allegiance, moment of silence, public service announcements. Then we will move to a public hearing in accordance with the Acts, Chapter 92 of the Acts of 2022, effective as of June 22nd, and MGL Chapter 54, Section 25B. It's a hearing regarding opting out of the option of vote by mail and early voting for the annual town meeting, for the annual town election of April 2025. Then we will move to department reports, which there are none tonight. Then we'll move to the town administrator's update. Action items including consideration and possible action on the 2025 seasonal liquor license for Hemlock Ridge Golf Course, Lee Palmer, located at 2020 Holland Road. Consideration and possible action on an application for a special one-day liquor license for Oakham Brewing Company for the location at Pickleball U at 178 Main Street. Consideration and possible action on the Recreation Department, MyRec.com standard software agreement for all program registration facility use. Consideration and possible action to approve a special use permit for a June 14th, 2025 event by the New England Mountain Bike Association, NEMBA, under the requirements outlined by the Conservation Commission in the letter dated February 25th, 2025. Consideration and possible action on the reappointment to the Board of Registrars of Cheryl Wood Creedon to expire to expire March 2028. Old business, correspondence, approval of minutes, citizens forum, and then under new business, we will convene a joint meeting with our friends on the Finance Committee, then executive session and adjournment. So with that, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I'd also just like to take a moment of silence. Just a lot of conversations going on, but just to think about the people in Ukraine and all the things they're going through. Thank you. Public service announcements. Mary Dell?
No.
Nope. I have one. The movie theater has opened, so it's good news for all. So with that, we got 2 minutes, I think, until, is it a 6:35 start?
Didn't actually have a posted time
Oh,
for
okay.
it, so.
So I think we can do the public hearing if Select Board Dowling, you want to call it?
Oh, I'm sorry, where is
On
it?
the public hearing on the early voting?
Do I not have the right? Did I look at yours? I pulled out the wrong one.
The Town of Sturbridge Select Board, in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 92, Acts 2022, and effective as of June 2022, and Mass General Laws, Chapter 54, Section 25B, hereby give notice that a public hearing will be held on Monday, March 3, 2025, 6:30 p.m. The purpose of the public hearing is to opt out of the option to vote by mail and early voting for the annual town election of April 2025. Any person interested in or wishing to be heard on the issue should appear at the time and place designated. The public hearing will take place at Veterans Memorial Hall, second floor, Town Hall, 308 Main Street, Sturbridge.
Great. Okay. So I think the meeting's now open. Lynn, I think you're coming on down.
Lynn Gerard, Town Clerk. I'm supposed to, that would be
I don't know, probably the microphone.
So Madam Town Clerk, what's going on?
So I come before the board to ask that we opt out of early voting and vote by mail for the local election. We will still have absentee voting available for all our residents at that time.
Okay. And it's just because it's a...
It's something that's mandated by the law.
Okay.
Otherwise, we have to opt out of it.
Do we have any questions from the board?
I don't have any questions. Maybe you, Lynn, can you just explain for the people watching how they go about the absentee ballot?
So all you have to do is call the town clerk's office, and we will send you an application. Once we receive the application, we'll put you on our absentee list. As soon as those ballots come in, we'll mail out the absentee ballot to you, and you can either drop that off, or you can mail it in, or you can come in person, fill out an application at that time, and you can vote in-house during our office hours.
So that's still available?
Yes.
Great. All right, it is a public hearing. Does anybody from the community have anything they'd like to say? All right, going once, going twice, sold. Okay, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Great. All right, do we have a motion on the substance of the hearing?
I'll make a motion that we opt out to vote by mail and early voting for the annual town election of April 2025.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Great, thank you. All right, moving to town administrator update. Robin, in your new spot.
My new spot for the night. Just a couple of things. I'm going to keep it brief because I want to make sure we end at 7 for FinCom. I sent you a memo. I'll start doing a weekly memo, just updating you of just generally things that I did all week, just so you're aware. If you have any questions on those going forward, you can ask me if they're individual questions, or if it's something that any of you want me to address to the whole board. I think that way, if there are questions ahead of time on any issue, you'll see what I'm working on, and if you have a question, we can just put it in front of the whole board, or like I said, an individual question. So I'm going to start trying to do those weekly, separate from just the biweekly memo. This week I did not do a biweekly memo because, again, you had that list, but also it's been primarily budget preparation. I did attend a very nice luncheon on Friday at Old Sturbridge Village. Jim Donahue hosted a lot of the local legislators to talk about the impact and importance of the village, of this part of the state, of tourism in this part of the Commonwealth. The state did do some budget cutting toward tourism, and the Mott grants went certain places but not other places. Discover Central Worcester, which is a great advertising tool group that we work with, have seen some budget cuts, and there's a concern that the money's not coming out here. And I think that the goal of that meeting was for Jim to really get those legislators in a room and say they were not aware that the funding had been reallocated the way it had, so it's not coming to this part of the Commonwealth. And we really are at the crossroads. OSV is a jewel. We are a tourist town. We benefit OSV, OSV benefits us, but also so do all of the surrounding communities in Worcester County. So it was an important event, and I think it wasn't a lot of people, but a lot of voice got out there about the importance of tourism money coming in. And they're advertising what they're seeing. Discover Worcester said the same thing, as did Jim, that they're seeing an uptick in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and New York tourism. And I think a lot of it has to do with people doing shorter driving trips, more affordable driving trips. And so they're beginning to want to push and advertise there, but they need the funding to do it. So
How many attended? Was Senator Fatman there?
Senator Fatman, our two reps were there. Senator Fatman and Representative Smoller were both there. And we had a couple of representatives from Southbridge, Uxbridge, Dudley area was represented. So a good portion of Blackstone Valley and Worcester County, I think we saw a little bit of a smattering from. He had maybe, I think, about representatives, either the reps themselves or representatives from their office. I would say from maybe about 12 or 14 maybe of them, plus the woman who runs Discover Central. So it was a decent.
As long as ours were there.
Ours were there. Ours were there and very vocal about the importance, and I think probably it was good because I'm not sure that they were aware of how that Mott funding, that travel and tourism, Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism funding was being spread around. And so I think it was a good awareness event for that. So just as an aside, 60-seater, the furniture's ordered, that'll be ready. The construction, the bids are out, the bid docs are out for that. I've got, I think, 8 requests for plans in, so hopefully I have a decent number of bidders, some local bidders on that. It's a relatively small grading and landscape project, so it's a nice project for some local bidders. So that is out. I met today about the library and commons lighting. They are rebuilding those lights. They're coming along. We are going to have them on a dimmer so that we can make them brighter for events, and realizing that we have homes around the common, we can actually dim them for regular nightly use. Because what we've done is we've increased the lighting, but our concern was with refurbishing, we'll have downward lighting, but it's not going to be like a brand-new style fixture to do that, so they're going to be brighter. And given that we have homes right along the commons, we want the ability to dim. So we will have dimmer capability on those, which I thought was a nice feature that we're going to be able to have. So that project is coming along well. Planning Committee met last Monday night about Podunk, and they did grant the scenic permit with the understanding that trees would be replaced 2 to 1 with minimum 2-inch. There was a discussion, and Selectwoman Dowling asked a good question about, can we do bigger plantings? But there are also concerns sometimes with the digging that goes with that. But they are required to put 2 for 1 on those trees, on the scenics and on certain portions of Podunk. This is separate from conservation. They also have to pay for any tree that's not planted, the equivalent of about $1,000, I think it is, for what will come down that will not be replanted. So that permit will result in I think it was $187,000 of money into our tree replanting account for future tree planting. They then have to go for conservation permits. There will be a much more significant number of trees coming down in some of that old area of Podunk that will fall into wetlands and conservation, and they will be required to pay by bylaw a sum of money for that. So it's going to be in their court now to look at what this is going to cost them to move forward, and that's fine, it's all within the bylaw. So planning, that was an important one on planning. People are still in the loop, residents are still in the loop, and we'll keep everybody updated.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It's not for tonight, but maybe an agenda item. The $1,000 that we're getting for the trees that are not going to get replanted, can we maybe have a discussion about possibly putting some of that in escrow specifically for that neighborhood if like some of those trees fail, rather than just going into general tree?
So it would go to tree
Because they're the ones who
replacement.
are suffering the consequences of having all their trees
Yeah,
cut.
and I think if, it's a tree replacement fund, so I think if those trees died, or, and it wasn't simply because the lighting is bad, or we need, it's not a good spot, or something underground is killing them, we certainly could look at replanting there, but I can look to see if we can
It's
specify
just a
the area.
discussion for another
Yeah.
night.
Yeah.
If some of it
Yep.
can be earmarked just for that neighborhood.
I think we don't have to get into it now, but I think it'd be a good education point for us, because as we went through all of those conversations with National Grid in the summer and figuring out what they were doing, where they were doing, and having them have a better, present a project in a full manner, it'd also be helpful for us to understand precisely where the handoffs are on our end. So, thank you, Robin. What else?
And finally, I did go over to the senior center today. The elevator inspectors were there. There's one more thing that they need to, one small hydraulic O-ring. But we all can remember, if we remember the space shuttle, how important O-rings are. So a relatively minor fix should be done within a couple days. The inspectors will come back out and re-inspect. But first floor is open. People were there, very active this morning. It looks lovely.
Great.
We will have a formal open house, hopefully within probably about 3 weeks, I think we're looking at.
Well, that's exciting.
We
Thanks,
will
Robin.
announce that as it comes.
Great. All right.
And that's it.
I think you also had the Cedar Street sidewalks, right?
Yep, I had sent you an email on that. Progress on that is going well. I am going to be putting a warrant article on for some free cash to cover easements. We're going to have sidewalk easements from all those property owners. So we're going to have permission and easement. Hopefully, we know that it was a priority for those property owners, but we hope that all are comfortable with granting easements. So we're going to have some legal stuff coming up, and I'm just putting about $20,000 in for free cash transfer for legal fees and recording fees for those easements.
Perfect. Now, is this the sidewalk to go all the way to the school?
All
or
part
is-
of that Complete Streets project.
But all of it? Because remember, there were two different grants that we're talking
Yeah,
about.
this is the Complete Streets that goes down the road, up from 20.
Great. Anything else?
That's it.
Perfect. All right, moving to action items. Consideration and possible action on the 2025 seasonal liquor license for Hemlock Ridge Golf Course / Lee Palmer, located at 220 Holland Road, Sturbridge, Mass. All right. What's it?
He was notified about this.
Okay.
He's gotten it every year.
Yeah, this is,
Yeah.
I
Never had a problem.
mean, we didn't have any red
Yeah, I don't
flags
need
on
to
it, so.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's going to be my comment. All right, do we have a motion from the board?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the 2025 seasonal liquor license for Hemlock Ridge Golf Course, Lee Palmer, located at 220 Holland Road, Sturbridge, Mass.
Second.
All those in favor? Great. Okay, and consideration and possible action on an application for a special one-day liquor license for Oakham Brewing Company for the location at Pickleball U at 178 Main Street, Sturbridge, Mass. 01566, from March 21st, 2025, from 5:30 PM to 10 PM. How's it going? All right. So, you guys have done this at Pickleball U before.
Yep.
Any questions from the board?
Nope.
All right, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the special one-day liquor license for Oakham Brewing Company for the location at Pickleball U at 178 Main Street, Sturbridge, Mass. For March 21st, 2025, from 5:30 PM to 10 PM.
Do we have a
Second.
All right, great. All those in favor? It's painless. Thank you
Do
for
you know,
coming in.
is pickleball going to be going on, or is this for a private
Yes, it's
function?
their 1-year anniversary party.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
So
fine.
the actual function is from 6 to 9, but I extended the time just in case we needed some time to
Sure.
set up and things like that.
Nice.
Okay, now which number license is this? You've done it before.
I did it last year for
And
pickleball
just-
in Sturbridge, so this is my first license that I've
Oh,
pulled in
okay.
Sturbridge.
Because I know Oakham
Yeah,
and a few others have.
Yeah, we haven't pulled any other permits this year in Sturbridge
okay.
that I know of.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay. Consideration and possible action on the Recreation Department, MyRec.com standard software agreement for all program registration and facility use.
So Andrew will address this. This is, I think it's something that'll make recreation a little more organizational, a little more efficient on our registration and tracking, so.
Yeah, so basically this is, it's a standard software. Actually, it's the one that almost the vast majority of communities in Massachusetts use for their recreational programming registration. It'll handle facility usage, so all of the sports fields, the town common, basically any facilities that recreation is responsible for booking, people will be able to put in a request online. When it comes to actual registration, not only does it let us do registration, but it also we can track attendance. So for the summer rec program, we're gonna be actually expanding it out to be not just a one fee for the whole summer, but you can sign up just for individual days or weeks, just trying to get a handle on who's going to be there what days, so we can staff accordingly if we need to flex more staff in or reduce staff on a day. Basically just keeping it a little bit more budget conscious. So it's going to allow us to do all of that. And again, attendance on this software gets tracked with timestamps, so we know exactly what time a kid shows up. We know exactly what time they leave. We can put notes on there, so if they get a paper cut or something, we can put those notes so that those are on that file. So it's just really streamlining the whole process.
Okay, and so what's the cost of this? Because I was a little confused by the schedule. 3,000? Because there's a schedule of fees on the second to last page, but,
Yeah, so the way this software company works with their fee structure is it is based on departmental revenue. So the more money you bring in, the higher the fee gets up to a set point. We're going in with the estimation of $60,000 of revenue coming in. So I don't, off the top of my head, I would think it was 32.50. 32.95, yes, which we did get quotes on other software, and this was significantly cheaper than anything else out there. And again, it's also the industry standard. It's also software I've used before, so it saves us weeks of trainings.
And it's revolving fund.
And it is coming out of
Yeah,
our
it comes out of
revolving fund.
okay, yeah, you're anticipating my next question. Okay, so it's 3,295. Mary, do you have a question?
I was just going to say, in a previous job, you utilized the same
Yes.
software.
Yeah, so I used it both in Palmer and Upton, so I've actually used it.
Perhaps I should know this, but how is this different from how our process has been with our existing software?
So currently, we don't have software.
At all.
So for like the New York City bus trip, for 17 people to register for that trip, it was 148 emails sent back and forth just to get 17 people registered. And, and those people represented families, obviously, like one person brought 5 people, but 17 individuals, 148 emails. Versus
No,
click
it's-
on,
it's pretty bad.
versus click register, and then the software also will let me email individual programs. So if, say, something gets canceled, volleyball gets canceled on a Monday night, I can just click email volleyball people, and it sends it to the specifically targeted people based on what they've registered for.
I think the selling point for me on this too, which Andrew had pointed out, was it's more efficient for how many children are we going to have at each day, each program, so that we can staff accordingly, and also keeping track of how many we had registered, how many came that day, who doesn't come. We were doing a lot more like paper tallies, and just with the number of children that are serviced in that program, especially in the summer, to be able to keep better tabs and better records on exactly who was there, who showed up, who had registered, and how we're planning our staffing. I think just it really is going to be a nice step forward for us.
Were we using like handwritten notes before this was not coming, that kind of thing?
So last summer, and going back however long, they basically had a list of everybody who paid for the summer, and some days they had 40 people, some days they had 150. And so without knowing that ahead of time, you staff as if you're going to have 150, and if 40 kids show up, you're paying a whole lot of staff to be there that don't need to be. But if you staff for 40 and 150 show up, you're in severe safety issues. So, so you always, I think traditionally they've been staffing for large numbers.
That makes sense. So you could tailor it now to the day.
And it'll also let us sort of, cap certain days. If we know for a fact we're at full capacity on a particular day, we can actually put a cap on it so we don't get 30 extra kids showing up when we know we functionally can't, service that.
Great. All right.
Do you plan on reaching out to the schools and to the local sports leagues to use the software, or is it just going to be in-house based? Because I know we did have one like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And I don't know how successful we were with it, but.
Yeah, so my understanding from software that the software that we had in the past was something that was gotten in conjunction with the facilities department, and it primarily handled facility usage and facility maintenance. So it really only covered essentially booking facilities. So there wasn't, at least not in recent history, there wasn't any software that handled registrations. It certainly has the capacity to handle team sports, and so we could certainly look into that. It does raise some questions with the finances, right? Because right now, like say youth soccer, they collect their money, and if they're registering through us, are we collecting their money and then paying it out to them? Are they still collecting separately from us? But there's a lot of questions involved with that. But certainly would be something we could look at, especially if all those agencies are paying for software. Then could help relieve that burden on them, and they could in turn help relieve the burden on us.
And maybe better field scheduling and all the concerns that we've seen with the leagues.
Yeah. Cool.
Anything else? Do we have a motion?
Okay, I'll make a motion that we give approval to acquire the Recreation Department, myrec.com standard software agreement for all program registration and facility use at the cost of $3,295.
Great. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Nice have it.
Good luck with
Great,
that.
thanks. All right, moving on to consideration and possible action to approve a special use permit for June 14th, 2025, for an event hosted by the New England Mountain Bike Association under the requirements outlined by the Conservation Commission in the letter dated February 25th, 2025. Hello, Nate.
Hello.
You just introduce yourself to the world.
Nate Lane, town resident at 22 Old Town Way, and president of the local chapter of NEMBA.
All right, great. So what's going on June 14th?
So this will be our second annual event. We did the same event last year, virtually copy and paste on the same permit. Went very well. But we went in front of the Conservation Commission, I think it was a week or two back. Also had conversation with OPACOM, the CR holder on some of the properties, along with the state of Mass. That was approved, and we're just here seeking the select board approval on the Riverlands usage for that day.
We have spoken with the police department. The only thing that we've had asked is no parking along the road there.
Correct.
Nate's aware of that.
Yep.
And if we have to put temporary no parking, we cannot, but I think you indicated that nobody had parked there.
Yeah, so we have, so OSV gives us the Museum Ed parking facility. It's capped at 150. Everything has to be pre-registered, or we have some day of registrations, but the event is capped based on the capacity of that lot. We didn't put up no parking signs on the access road last year. We will this year, but we did not have parking overflow last year. So we should be in good shape. Even if we did, OSV offers the charter school lot for our overflow if necessary.
Okay, great. Any questions from the board?
I just have, how many people, out of curiosity, did you draw last year? And what towns did they come from?
Yeah, so we had, as far as paid attendees, we had 120. We had additional locals staffing the event, so I think we were around 140 in total. A great community that contributes to all of this. We actually ran the data, and about 3/4 of the attendees were more than a half hour away, and half were more than an hour away. So it pulled some out-of-towners. NEMBA is all across New England. There's now 37 chapters, and every chapter hosts an annual event. So there are a lot of people in New England who just attend all of these. So it was great exposure in that way.
Oh, yeah, I think that's fantastic.
All right, any other questions from the board? Do we have a motion?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve a special use permit for a June 14th, 2025 event hosted by the New England Mountain Bike Association under the requirements outlined by the Conservation Commission in a letter dated February 25th, 2025.
Great, do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Excellent.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nate.
All right, moving on to consideration and possible action on the reappointment to the Board of Registrars of Cheryl Wood Creedon to expire March 2028.
Just a reappointment.
Yeah, it's just a reappointment. Any questions, comments? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the reappointment of Cheryl Wood Creedon to the Board of Registrars to expire March 2028.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Great. All right, old business. Any old business, Chase?
None, thank you.
Mary Dowling?
Not tonight.
Nope.
And I have none. Correspondence, I don't think we had any, did we? Nope. All right, and then we are on to two sets of meeting minutes. Starting with the February, or strike that, starting with the April 16th, 2024 minutes. Any
Okay,
comments?
these are the ones we straightened up.
Yeah. Anything? All right, do we have a motion?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of April 16th, 2024 as amended.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
I'm going to abstain on that because I was absent.
Okay. All right, and then moving to the February 18th, 2025 meeting minutes. Any adjustments?
There we go.
Anything? All right, do we have a motion?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of February 16th, 2025 as written.
Do we have a second?
February 18th, right?
Oh, 18th, yeah. That's a typo on the,
Yes.
yeah, it's a typo on the agenda.
I have done that.
It's correct now.
It's correct on the minutes.
Yeah, that's the first time we've had to fix the agenda item. All right, great. So now I think it's 7 o'clock.
Do we vote?
Oh, we didn't vote, sorry. All those in favor? Great, we have in favor.
Pretty good.
All right, 7 o'clock on the nose.
Clear that well.
No, that's not right. I'm looking at.
No,
East of-
that's fast, it's 7 o'clock.
It's San Cupertino time or
I'm
whatever.
just going to call our meeting to order then, too. So
We'll
call
let them
order
open,
7.
yep.
Yeah. Okay, so,
We'll get the projector up right now.
okay. And you do have the lines open, right, for the
What's it?
dial-in?
Yeah, they're coming up right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's set up as a virtual, just a link. Jeremy's here anyway. We got Jeremy in the back in case something goes wrong. Here we go. Bridge to nowhere. So we need to open the meeting.
Yeah, so.
There it is. Okay, there's our go-to meeting.
Mr. Rose.
This-
Chris Rose is there.
So who else is on, from you?
I was expecting Larry Morrison to dial in,
Yeah, Larry will
too.
probably dial in. Okay.
And then we just have one person who's unavailable tonight, so
Okay.
that would be it.
And Becky's here, and Ken was supposed to try to dial in as well. So do you guys need to open officially?
I did.
Oh, you opened? You're all open?
Okay.
Okay.
All right, then, first of all, thank you guys for all coming tonight. It's great to see all your faces. And then just before we get to the presentation, I say this often, but I don't think our FinCom can be thanked enough for their work. The detail and thoroughness that you guys approach this with is vital to the town, and that it's important for us, because as we're moving fast and doing all these things, make sure that checks and balances working. So with that, so I think we're going to start with the budget presentation, unless there's anything you guys like to say, Kev.
No.
All right.
I would like to invite Town Moderator Darren up just to say a few words before I give my presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm using the visibility of this meeting to let the townspeople know and all of you know that I am actively recruiting people who may be interested in serving on this vital board. I can tell you that it's rewarding. Its work is compressed, but I found it an unexpected challenge when I had to replace myself on the board and one other person when they resigned. So, to the extent I'm asking for folks' assistance in recruiting people, they can respond or send me an email with a statement of interest and qualifications. Of course, I will talk with them at my town email address, moderator@sturbridge.gov. Please, as I'm asking for your assistance, don't send me names of people for me to call. I would rather have these be self-starting and self-interested people. So, thank you very much, and I look forward to a productive meeting.
Is there one opening?
I anticipate, there are no openings at this moment,
Okay.
but I anticipate one opening. And I would like to not have to wait until there's a vacancy to start looking. So I'd like to have people become interested, perhaps talk with Kevin and other members of the board and me to see if this is a fit for them. All right, any other questions?
Thanks, Lee.
All right, thanks for the opportunity.
And if Barbara could just join me up here.
Come on down.
Francis, you want to put that presentation up, and I'll just kind of click to you when I need you to click over. So you could actually go to the next slide, because we know what it is tonight. Okay, welcome, everybody, and I do want to thank our Select Board, under the chairship of Jamie Goodwin, Finance Director Barbara Barry. I can't thank Barbara enough. One thing I think needs to be said in this town that a lot of people are not aware or may not be aware in the public, you all know, obviously, and finance knows. But a lot of towns have finance directors, finance people, and they also have a treasurer collector. I think one of the things that sometimes gets forgotten is that in this town, that's a dual position, finance director and treasurer collector, and not every town does it that way. So I want to thank Barbara, because it's an extraordinary amount of work really overseeing two very different roles. The finance director really is a guide to pulling this budget together. All of our borrowing, debt, all of that stuff falls under your finance director, very separate from your treasurer collector. So I want to thank Barbara and really give her a huge shout out. I think sometimes it's the bulwark on the numbers that it's not the most exciting stuff all the time. So we always see the big projects and all the fun, you know, the good, positive stuff, but behind the scenes are the numbers. And we can't do it without the numbers. And we can't do it and maintain the way we have with the Prop 2.5, not asking for overrides without really good fiscal management. And I just think sometimes that gets overlooked. We have a lot of fun projects, but numbers aren't fun for a lot of us, except maybe her. And I think that needs to be recognized.
Can I just interrupt
yeah.
with just a quick brief? I think I heard someone join, and I just wanted for the record to see if it was the member I'm missing.
Yeah, let's see who joined. That was Ken.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay. And also the Finance Committee, under the chairship of Kevin Smith. All of our department directors, I want to thank my departments. They knew what a tight budget it was. Tonight, you're going to see a budget that you'll see departmental requested, but the departmental requested that we started working with was not actually the original departmental requested. We went through on an initial round, and I'll get into that more later, how big the gap was. And I want to thank our directors for really understanding the importance of maintaining the services that we provide and doing so with some very unexpected, uncontrollable increases in the budget, and being able to do that and keep at that level of service without having to use that horrible override word that we don't want to hear, and still maintaining as best as we could sound fiscal practices. I want to thank the superintendent of schools. I believe there she is, and she will be here. She is here this evening for you if you have any questions. And I don't know if Kathy is here. Kathy Kelly's here. Thank you. So Kathy and her team from Burgess. Couple of things I always go through, just generally what we do for the preparation process. We look at 5-year projections and a 3-year look back. This year, one of the things we've had to consider are supply issues and delivery delays in capital purchases. That was something we had to take into consideration. We always analyze potential revenue numbers. We don't assume a tax to the max. I don't look at Barbara first and say, here's what 2.5 on the levy gives us, and then says to the departments, here's what we have, spend it. We try to start the opposite way. You can't do truly the performance-based budget in a municipality, because there are some things that just don't work that way, but we can do it as best as possible to have that mindset. We also, for revenue, consider growth, interest income, local receipts, meals taxes. This year, all of these were pretty flat, so that, meant that we had to be really careful in how we budgeted, and the governor's budget is showing, with my screen, Francis.
They can't hear from
Jeremy.
Paul. No, they can't hear.
Okay. And the governor's budget is only showing a 0.6% increase in local aid. Hold for a second.
Yeah, they can't hear from anyone who's online. Can't hear
okay. Oh, someone else pop in there for you? No? Caller one, is that, it might be Larry?
I think they went away, though.
Oh, they turned on and left.
Wrong number.
They can hear now, Jeremy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they've got us. Okay. And the governor's budget showed only a 0.6% increase in local aid. So that was one of the things we were very concerned about going into this, and right now that's kind of where that number sits. Francis? The other thing we look at is we consider initial expenditure requests. As I mentioned, we don't look at the revenue initially. If later, when we look at Prop 2.5, if after we've scaled back, we say, okay, we actually have a little bit of room in the levy cap, and there are things that we cut that we'd like to put back into an operating budget, we can do so at that time. We did not have that latitude this year. Reviewing all non-discretionary spending, and I think this is really important to note because these were the budget drivers. These alone were our budget drivers this year. Worcester County Retirement System contribution increased 16.7%. It normally goes up 8%, 9%, but 16.7% represented an additional, $139,000? So close to $140,000 on our budget. That's a lot of money on a budget our size. Group insurance, on average, 16.1%. Maya went up 9.9 to about 20% for all of its communities. We got the 9.9. A lot of that's, we maintain healthy models. We keep trying to work on healthy lifestyle programs. Lynn is always running something for fitness and general health. We try to remind, and I think we want to do like a little forum actually on using your healthcare like a consumer, how to use it as a, save everybody money, because the less we use, realistically, the lower our rates go in the group. It's all scaled based on usage. The retirees went up 20%. That is across the board right now on all the retiree and Medicare type programs. That's huge. So it went up on average 16.1. Some of that also is, if we increased enrollment, if a family plan came on, or remember, we do the schools. So if we have a lot of younger people who teach in the school system. If somebody has a child, we add a dependent. So sometimes enrollment goes up, sometimes numbers go up that way, but overall 16.1%. And we had a small increase in our insurance blanket, our overall insurance, about
Possibly a high
35,000.
deductible, or to look at high deductibles and self-funded with free cash, so somebody self-insure some of this, or is there any way, or is that it?
We probably are not we don't have a big enough pool to take the risk of self-insurance and like start a trust like that. I would think we'd be at risk to try to get rolling on that. We are looking at different models. I have shopped around a bit. We were looking to go out to bid again on it, but then when the numbers came back this year, and we looked at what other comparable communities were getting, we were so much better than even the companies that are on the towns that are on their own, that we're probably right now, in the short term, better off. But I will tell you, we're going to look at things like plan design, but again, that has to be discussed with the unions. How we can do slight plan design changes that might reduce that number pretty significantly. And again, it's not off the table, just not in time this year to look at going out to bid next year and different options for healthcare. But there's not much we can do with that 20% on the retirees. That is everywhere across the board right now on retiree healthcare. So that's a big, big driver. But yeah, I'm always open to options on insurance and building a better mousetrap on that. And the insurance blanket, we did start looking at pricing out. We are still pricing out property insurance. I have a couple of people looking at the bid on it. Property and casualty, it looks right now that Maya's going to keep our increase relatively low. I have been, as I said, out shopping, and they know I've been out shopping, so never hurts to, I'm a believer in competition. Next slide, Francis. Next slide, Francis. Thanks. So back up. There we go. So this isn't how much each of these areas went up on the total budget, but this is the percentage of the increase that they represent. So for instance, Worcester Retirement, you see there is 24.2. It went up 16.7%, but when you look at our total budget increased about $1.5 million that's the increase. Based on just that increase, that comes up to about 104%. I know it doesn't add up perfect, but some rounding things. But Worcester Retirement is 24% of that $1.5 million increase. The health insurance, 22.3%. And then you look at Burgess, general government salaries, they account for about 12% of that increase. What you will see later is that, for instance, the general government salaries went up on average total of the budget 2% for the total budget, because we had some decreases, some increases. But of that 1.5 million that we went up, you can see that right there, 45% of it was in those two uncontrollable costs.
I just have to ask a question. Earlier in your statement, you said the insurance went up $139,000 roughly.
Increase.
Increase was $139,000. So if the whole budget increase is 1.5 million, how's it 24% and not 10?
Well, it went up 380,000, 1 point something more than what it did last year. So last year it went up 8%, Worcester Retirement, which comes out to 100-something thousand, let's say.
So you're saying the additional 1.8%?
The additional, right, is that 140, because what did we spend, 300-something thousand to Worcester Retirement this year? Right. Right.
So 10% versus 16.7%
Right.
was about $139,000. So I initially had budgeted for a 10% increase.
Right.
Came in at 16.6 or 16.7, which was an additional $139,000 over.
But the way it was stated, though, I understand.
Right. Well, my point, and my point was, so $300-some-odd thousand this year is what it went up total. That represents 20% of that 1.5 million.
Okay.
I just want people to see when they say, well, why did our budget go up? Why did you increase it $1.5 million? I wanted people to see how that broke out percentage-wise.
Robin, does Worcester County Retirement use PRIM to invest their money?
I don't know who their driver
Like the
is.
state, I think it's called PRIM, it's the State
I don't- I'm
Public
not-
I can
Retirement
find out
Investment
for you.
Committee or whatever it is.
We can find
No big
out.
deal, that's,
Yeah.
it just is curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, there had to be, so there was some dramatic reamortization. I mean, for it to go up 16.7% versus our normal 8 or 9%, you know, that would have normally been a 150,000 increase. This year, it's 350,000. You know, I mean, that's dramatic. And we can't weather that all the time. And we're not getting the sense from them that's going to happen again next year. They just, obviously, they did some adjustment. They may have, you know, maybe rate of return got lowered, anticipated rate of return. If they recalculate living expectancy, life expectancy, all of those things drive those. But this was just a dramatic hit that we were like, you know, we were budgeting worst-case scenario 8 or 9, 10%, and this came back in. So right there's 100-something thousand, more than what the increase would have been. Next slide. So closing the gap, so when we first came in, there was a gap of $815,000 from what the departments requested and what we had when we put the Prop 2.5 levy in. We estimated reasonable revenues, and we put it all together, and Barbara said, well, we've got an $815,000 gap. And on a $44 million budget, that's a lot. So we did a few things. You may be aware we combined 2 positions, and I'll get into details later on where all these came from. We have a 1.0 full-time equivalent reduction, 2 part-time, basically a part-time and a half position effectively. We removed 2 police cruisers from the operating budget. We are only buying 1 cruiser. We're buying it through free cash. And again, I'll talk later about the fact that it's out of the operating budget, but it's still, you know, now it's from free cash. We're still buying it, but we are buying 1 less. We are purchasing a school bus through free cash. That was in the original operating budget. And again, I'm not naive. It's not an elimination of money. It's a moving of it to a more feasible area where we can function and not reduce service. We did reduce overtime requests from police and fire, partially because we're pretty much fully staffed. We have a couple people out in the departments for different reasons. We might have IODs, we have a couple, you know, issues like that. But basically, we're relatively fully staffed. When we are relatively fully staffed, we require less backfilling of positions. And I am grateful to the police and fire departments. They run very well on their sick time. There's not abuse of that type of a thing, and that allows us to be able to keep those numbers in check, and we reduced the request a little bit this year. We eliminated any unnecessary upgrading of equipment or purchases, and not to pick up police, like for instance, you know, the drone is due to be upgraded. Can we wait a year? You know, yeah, we can wait a year. We can wait a couple of years on these things, some of these things. So we really looked at, unfortunately, we had to kind of look at what's the really nice to have and what we must have when you have a gap of 815,000. You know, Sturbridge has been very blessed. We've had a lot of nice to haves, but this year was a must-have year as we move forward. And we had to do some limiting funding of our stabilizations. We still honor the financial policies that we put forward. Things like OPEB are funded, but where we had a little bit of latitude, this is just not a year we can build our funds. And sometimes, again, this is why you have stabilization funds. Next slide.
Can I ask a quick question on this
Yep.
one? Roughly, how much did you reduce what the police and fire were requesting?
On overtime, depending on each of their
You
budgets.
know, it's like 5%, 10%, or?
I don't know the percentage.
know
I
the
think it was
percentage.
25,000 in one and 20. 20,000 police. Okay, so, and then fire was 25.
25, yep.
You reduced it by 20,000?
Yeah.
Okay.
But we base that on how they're tracking this year. We base that on how well-staffed they are. You base that on a history of what their usage has been. It's not just an arbitrary cut. It's
So they must have had some kind of cushion put in that
Well-
you removed, basically?
So when I'm looking at the budgets or the revenues, I'm looking at, you know, actual expenditures, in this case for your question. What did we spend, you know, in the past 5 years? You know, what are we looking at? Like I asked both chiefs to look at like the fill rate that they budget overtime at. And so, you know, we met with them and they both felt comfortable that we could reduce by that dollar amount. So we didn't just do a percentage, but we did look at every single year what the turnbacks were. And they'll have to just watch a little bit more closely this year. And if they don't have to fill shifts because of overtime. If there's enough people on duty that shift, then that's what they'll have to do. I just want to caution everybody that as we do these things of tightening the expenses and being a little bit more aggressive on the revenues, those things are going to affect our free cash balance down the road. And so, you know, the days of a $7 million free cash number, that's going to start going away. But I think it was important to like look very closely at these type of things this year, just because of the situation that we were in. And Robin will talk about some of the other external things that we were
It
facing.
almost seems like we're living beyond our means if we're tapping into a reserve to
No.
do operating, because
No, I
that
just.
can't go on.
No, let me, if I could,
Yeah.
I'll address some of that as we go. Yeah, but I will say this, as Barbara said, the turnback money, every year you tighten down a budget, that turnback money gets less and less. The other thing is that as our departments are fully staffed, there's going to be less and less. A lot of that turnback money comes if you have 2 vacant positions in the police department half the year. That's a lot of free cash that gets turned back. Some of it gets eaten up in overtime to offset that, but not all of it. So to those questions, that's why sometimes those numbers fluctuate. But we'll get into the fact that it's, right now, when we looked at what we could or could not cut, we're,
Yeah, I think there's also some, you got revenue, then you got your cost and expenses, and then you got some sort along the line. I read the thing that I didn't see a lot of, and maybe it's in another plan, efficiencies or computerization and technology. And I'm not just talking about computer technology. I mean, I think one year the police got a detective, and they said, oh, it's going to reduce paperwork. Therefore, maybe the people on duty now are more efficient. That's great. That's technology. I would consider that technology. So I think when the revenue's lower, rather than saying, oh, when we save in $815,000, maybe we say, no, how do we reduce it by $815,000 and maintain the services? It's tough. It's an exercise, but it's also a culture, rather than just saying,
yeah.
okay, we just keep adding.
And you just had an example, the board just voted on a software right now, a $3,200 software to be paid out of revolving funds to make far more efficient how we do rec programming. Because Andrew, I think, said for 17 people, he had 100-something emails. 148 emails that he had to deal with for a registration of 17 people for one event. So for $3,200, we now can do this much more efficiently. If we had 3 people in rec, we'd probably be able to eliminate one of those positions. The reality is, all it does is free up the rec director to do more and better things. So you won't see a budget shift from something like that. Will you see better performance from the people we have? Yes. Where you would see that have the impact you'd like to see it have on the budget would be if we had staff doing all those inefficient things, but that's a one-person department.
Yeah.
So if we had multiple person departments and we were able to find ways through computer efficiencies and consolidation to do it better, we would, and then you would reduce staff.
Actually, you notice that in the fire department, you had some sort of software which you implemented, and I read that, and said, that's great, that's exactly, how many other like ideas can we shift to other departments and keep pushing it that way?
We are trying, but again, I agree, and I'd rather see people performing better so that our services stay as good as they are. And you'll see where we combine 2 director positions, for example, right now, and reorganize. So let me get through that, but we'll get to that. General salary information, as I said, of that 1.5 million, 12.9% was due to increases in salary, but as a percentage of the overall budget, it was about 2%. This is on the municipal side. Our labor increases were contractual, 2.75 with police this year, 2.0 for fire going into next year. We budgeted an amount for DPW. Obviously, we're going into negotiations, so I don't really want to discuss exactly what the amount was, but we have a reasonable amount budget that we will be able to weather what gets negotiated. Non-union personnel got 2.75. There are still people on the personnel manual steps that they would get the step with that. Overall, the general salary increases came in at about 2.0%. The reason it came in relatively low, even with the contractual and personnel manual increases, were we did do some consolidation of staff. We had retirements, so longevity goes away. When we hire someone new, they come in at a lower step, so there was some savings there. We we try to be very reasonable. It's hard to recruit and hire at step one right now because salaries are very competitive, but we typically are not hiring at what somebody left at. So there is savings there. And then with the reduction and consolidation of staff, we combined 2 directors when our facilities director left. We've now combined facilities and IT. It's a model used in the school department. It's a model used in other communities. Facilities has an IT component to it now, much more so than it has in the past. We have HVAC systems. We have video and IT video systems that are looped into IT. Our monitoring of our facilities, while Veolia does the water sewer, those types of monitoring are all IT-based. So there's a lot of bridge between those departments now. It's not like in past years where they were very separate and facilities was really much more construction-based. So we did combine those, and instead of having 2 directors, we now have 1 director for both of those, and we budgeted for a part-time, it says IT tech, but that IT tech who also can assist the director in doing things like inventory on janitorial supplies, making the phone calls to the companies to order those things, as well as working help desk items, so that as we have things break down, to your point, we can get somebody right there and not take the director off a major project, which is really inefficient. So that's probably the biggest major shift this year in operations. It's really the only operational shift I think we have. Next one, thanks, Francis. Just briefly on the schools, Burgess, 1.4, Tantascwa, 5.5. The school bus purchase is out of free cash. I am certainly going to defer. I think you haven't even had your public hearing yet. So those, just generally, those are the numbers that are in there, but those are not hard and fast. Those are placeholders. So again, I don't want to speak for the school, but I have to put a number in there.
It's fine. The school committee knows that
Yes.
share where I think we're gonna go.
Yes.
They just haven't gone there yet.
Yeah, and so because the school committee hasn't vetted it, I don't want to go into any more than that, and
You're just referring to Burgess and Tantascwa. The school bus is actually happening out of our cash.
yeah, so the school bus will be on the warrant as a free cash item, yes.
Will we be getting, usually the school purchases 2 buses. Are we getting 2? One, we're just getting 1?
One this year.
Not true.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, one's still in the butt, right.
We'd still be getting 2. The second one would be on the Tantascwa end, which comes from the Tantascwa transportation assessment, but embedded in that is the regional reimbursement that it's eligible for. So we intentionally left that one there because state reimbursement will pay for 75 to 80% of it.
But the second one is coming from the town,
The second one-
and not the school's
the second
operating
one
budget.
would have been in the Burgess budget.
Would have been, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a Burgess purchase.
And that breakdown of 52%, what percentage Burgess versus Tasqua? I mean, what's the breakout? The total is 52% for the education budget, right?
Should be
What
in here.
percent is what school, and I don't have the numbers.
So I guess, are you saying 52% of?
The total
town
budget, say $21 million
Is-
so which is the breakout? How much are we spending for?
I'd have to look at the 2 numbers. Typically, when you look at the way that you look at it, the Burgess is the higher percentage because the Tantascwa assessment is net the state
Yeah.
chapter 70 money.
Oh, is that what it comes out of? Okay.
Right. So it looks, because in reality, they're probably fairly close if you backed out the state funds. But in the picture you're looking at, state funds have only been backed out of the Tantascwa assessment. The number at the town meeting is always lower for Tantascwa than the Burgess, because your Burgess is Sturbridge only
Yep.
and has not applied all of the other revenues that you applied to it, such as the state revenues.
And I want to thank the school department, both school departments, school committee. They're good partners with us and really understand the positions that we're in, and we work together on a number of things. So I thank Deb for her efforts. Key departmental changes, I touched on some of these. We eliminated the pool administrative position. We had reduced that to part-time last year. We had it at full-time. We didn't really feel it was enough work. We reduced it to part-time. I don't think I even advertised for it at part-time. We've had some staffing change over there with directors, and things seem to be working a little better and a little more cohesively. So we can live without it. We got rid of it. Information technology, and here's what we did with that. That's where we get the equivalent of a reduction of 1 full-time equivalent. So we got rid of the pool administrative position, which was part-time last year. We added the part-time IT tech but we consolidated 2 director positions. Landfill, this was one of the things we looked at when we look at, are we really properly allocating our funds? And so the health director does oversee the pay-as-you-throw and has some work associated with that, and the Board of Health revolving funds. And typically, portions of salaries should be paid out of revolving funds if the work is done in relationship to that money that's earned. So there was a shift of, what, 10,000 in each, or 10,000 total, I can't remember. Was it 5,000 out of each? I think it was. Out of each of those revolving funds, a small portion of the director's salary came from those. And so there was a slight reduction you'll see in the operating budget. That's a case where you saw some operating budget reduction coming out of the revolving funds. Remember, revolving funds pay for themselves. So, and then elections, it's a lower number this year just because we have the one local. So we don't have a lot of expensive elections this year.
And you see that portion of his salary being paid out of the revolving funds going forward? This is not a
Yes.
one-time?
Yes, they belong, they really do belong there.
Okay.
Betterment, just some general funding of the annual requests, and then some highlights, deck ride mower, American flag installation. So this is, we in the past, years ago, fire department had done it, but that's hard when they get calls. And then at one point, prior to Heather getting here, we found out that people put ladders on poles and climb them to hang flags, and that's not really safe. Square ladders on round poles, just ethically, we weren't comfortable with putting people up to do that, and frankly, I don't think Maya would be thrilled. Our insurance policy might go up a little more than it did. So we looked at how to do this, and it's the cheapest, most efficient way is to rent a cherry picker for a day and just do it right, and we put the flags up, and then we rent them and pull it down. So we put a little money in there for that, at Betterment funding, some hydro seeding at Cedar Lake, and some field seeding, just some of the highlights in Betterment.
So the lights, the flags are lit 24 hours a day. They're lighted at night, correct?
Well, they're on the street lights. They're on the street light poles. So yes, they will be appropriately
They have to be
lit.
lighted.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, these are the street poles. These are the street light poles that we have.
After sunset, they have to be.
Yeah. Let's see. Yep, so capital plan and projects, free cash, stabilization purchases. We are purchasing an ambulance. We are purchasing a portion of it proposing to purchase a portion of it out of free cash, and we are using a little bit of our ambulance stabilization fund. We do have that money there for that. One of the things I want to mention on all of these vehicles, and I have a note there, the prices you're seeing are likely a little bit higher than what they will be, but one of the challenges, couple challenges. Number one, the supply issues are throwing everything off as to supply and demand on what we know prices will be. The other thing is that we could not get quotes for a lot of things that couldn't be purchased until July 1st back in December and January. So usually when we're doing this, it's February, end of February. We have a better shot of getting more accurate quotes for July 1st. There was a lot of concern that we're going to see some inflation in these. So we have in all of these 10 to 20% higher than what they may cost. So we're hoping that, we budget it. If it doesn't cost that much, that money just goes back to where it came from and it stays where it is. But we don't want to take a chance at under budgeting these and being in trouble. DPW dump vehicles, you will see these on the special town meeting warrant. The reason they are on the special is that we don't, and these are going to be funded, proposed from free cash. We do not want to wait to July 1st to put it in order. There is a state mandate that all vehicles sold in the state have to be electric, including plow trucks. We don't have the infrastructure for electric, nobody has the infrastructure in the state right now for electric plow trucks, including DOT. But the mandate is still in place. It has not been rescinded. They don't operate or function well in the cold weather. The hydraulics don't work well. It's just not a good scene. So what's happening is DPWs are scrambling while we can still buy diesel trucks to buy diesel trucks because they won't function. We don't have the infrastructure.
When does that take effect, all electric?
26, I think, is the.
The model year 2026. 26. So I'm sorry, I just wanted to, I actually, there's a little blurb in the capital budget regarding the emissions, and then if you go to the appendix of the budget book, I also put 2 articles that I had reviewed with Heather that really clearly identify like what the concerns are and what the process will be. So I encourage you to read those. Also, at the end of at least one of the articles, there are some links to other articles. Obviously, well, actually, you do have it in electronic portion also, because I did send the PDF. And I think the board also got the PDF of the budget, but, because that is a real thing, but I think it's also important that there is, like, MMA is working to try to get it delayed because of all the reasons that Robin just said. Sorry.
But you're saying models, 2026 models will
Yes.
all be electric?
No, we can't.
Or
we will not be
it
able
takes
to buy
effect in
them.
It takes
Right.
effect in
In 26, we will no longer be able to.
Whatever we have, we can use.
Somebody can't sell an electric vehicle.
But it's not,
a non-electric
is it
in
January
Massachusetts.
1st, 2026?
I don't know.
It said it was model year 2026 is how it was
We
written.
cannot sell a model
We're
year.
planning for an infrastructure.
So that's what I meant.
for
So the
plugging in,
models,
right, for
the
electric
2026
infrastructure.
models
Okay,
or
let's,
year 2026?
everybody one at a time.
It's
So
model
ma-
year 2026, so that would mean that if we were going to buy a vehicle that was model year 2026, we would have to buy a vehicle that met those emission standards.
So I'm thinking, don't models come out before the actual year? So in the fall, you know, when I buy a car, in the fall, you can often buy the following year.
So that's
So it is
exactly-
model 2026, not necessarily calendar year 2026.
And that's exactly
Okay.
why we are putting this on the special. Because if we wait till July 1st, we may not be able to find 2025s. Or 24s even. I mean, everybody is
I just wanted to
scrambling.
clarify that. It's
Yeah,
not the year, it's the
everybody's scrambling
model.
to buy these up.
Got it.
So the goal is, normally, we might have even put off one of these purchases and bought one. But given that even beyond getting the infrastructure in place, the performance of the vehicles right now is not there. It's not, the technology hasn't caught up. We don't have a place to store electric vehicles indoors. We don't have a DPW garage that we can put them in. Those are all things that have to be considered. Other communities are scrambling about this as well. As Barbara said, MMA, the Mass Municipal Association, is working to try to address this, understanding this really primarily came out of a lead from a couple of reps in the eastern part of the state. And, you know, they're towns that may have facilities that can support this as far as storing them, but even still, the vehicles themselves are not ready to handle the kinds of storms where we're out for 45, 50 hours. You would have to pull a truck off the road much sooner. So now you actually would need more trucks.
So am I correct in assuming we don't really need these
Well, we do.
now?
We-
Well, let me just
right.
finish. We're getting them early because we worry about not wanting the 2026 models that are electric. So are these would we be buying these now if we didn't have that limitation? Because otherwise, shouldn't we put them away and
Right.
continue to use what we have and kind of like have them new for
So
when we need them?
We probably would have looked to replace at least one of them this year,
Okay.
very likely.
But you know what I'm saying? We're going to
Right.
put the other one like
difference is-
away?
The difference is normally, when we replace one, we get rid of the other one that we're replacing, one for one. This year, more than not needing these, what's going to happen is, we're going to try to keep the other ones as well, so that everything can just last longer, until this gets sorted out. Until somebody has to sort out what we're going to do on how we're going to plow roads with electric.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but they're still gonna make diesel models. It's not all going electric. Red states don't have this mandate, and
no,
like,
it
you're
is-
gonna be able to order a diesel
It's
truck.
because Massachusetts
Right. No, I
adopted.
understand
Following
that, but-
California emissions, right. The
Right.
diesel, if you were in, Ohio.
Yeah, but it's not like on January 1st, a magic wand comes and everything's
No,
electric.
you just can't
That's-
sell them here.
Yeah.
Well, the problem I think I remember from the Capitol hearings when we discussed this is that there isn't even electric trucks that do this.
No. Right.
They don't exist.
Yeah.
But even though we're required and mandated to buy them, they just don't exist.
So realistically, if the old ones break down to a point that they can't be used, we're out a truck.
Well, it sort of, that won't be legal. They're not gonna, it's not gonna work. So, listen, if your point is that we're being aggressive because there's insecurity about what's happening, that makes a lot of sense. And is that a fair
That's
summation?
exactly what it is.
Yeah, okay. But otherwise, let's also, what are they gonna do? Like, we gotta plow road. It's honestly, I don't usually just throw up my arms like that, but it is what it is.
I don't know what the
So
DOT is gonna do,
anyways,
so.
so move it, let's just keep it moving.
Yeah, and I would
Because
just,
it's enough of a problem, the legislature is going to change the
They- they
legislation
already
and
did
extend the
once.
date. That's
right,
all.
this was
already
already
once,
supposed to
but-
go into effect. And I would just say too, the reason we are putting it on the special town meeting is we're also trying to get a jump ahead of all the other towns that will
Right.
have funding on July 1st. So we are, in this regard, taking advantage of our April town meeting so that we can put the order in the day after. Or at least
Yes.
Heather can.
All right, and then stormwater compliance is always in our budget, that, you'll see that on the warrant, that's a state mandated compliance. Free cash, just a little, free cash. Francis wants me to be done with this. The current free cash balance is $5,982,485. The proposed use of free cash for capital and other spending through the annual special, the annual and special, because some of this, those DPW trucks, for example, are in the special, is $2,099,692.29. That will leave remaining free cash of $3,888,792.71. That is it should be 8.8%. I just wanted to put more eights in there. Compared to 10.8% last year, remaining. The government standards are basically 1 to 2 months of operating revenue, which depending on, falls between 8.3 and 16.7. We're still within the range. We're not as, where I like to be in the range, as comfortably as I'd like to be in the range, and every year turnback will be less and less again as budgets tighten. We're still safe and we're still comfortable, and there's not a concern about our bond rating, but I think it's important to note that's a significant difference.
Percent with the stabilization fund between free cash and stabilization, what's the total percent? 'Cause don't we have a policy
Yeah,
10 to
we're gonna-
15% total?
Yeah, we're going to be right around the 15.
Right around, yeah.
We're at the max.
We're a little bit below the 15, I believe, yeah.
Yeah, so we're just, okay, so we're not
So we're
like.
still, no, we're still comfortable, but we're not, but this has definitely been taken down a good notch. But that's, I mean, again, we go back to what is free cash for, and should we be sitting on cash? No, we should not, and as long as we're still safe. But I do get concerned that there will be less and less
Within a
turnback.
range of the guidelines, and it takes away the issue of, we're above the guidelines, what do we do with it?
Yep.
right? We're doing something with it.
Yes.
Falls within the guidelines. We'll
And what
see
we are- yeah.
if we continue to fall in
And I
future
think
years.
what's really important, and we'll get to this a little bit too, is while I don't love buying police cars out of an operating budget, out of free cash, it is exactly what it's for. It is to bridge things. They're not frivolous purchases, and we're not balancing the budget with free cash, which would be a far greater concern. In this case, we're using it for non-frivolous, important purchases that some of them I'd like to have better in the operating budget in a perfect world, but this year's not a perfect world.
You're presenting to us a balanced budget, right, with exactly zero growth. Yet you're using free cash to fund operating expenditures for a school bus, a police car, and then we're also not funding the ambulance stabilization fund, and we're not going to fund the fire vehicle.
Can I finish the presentation?
Well, but I mean, I take, the thing I disagreed with you there is that you are using free cash to pay operating expense to balance the budget. Now, right, maybe this is a one-year plan, but then we really need to think, I mean, you either have to reduce costs for fiscal year '27, or we have to find new revenue sources for fiscal year '27, because next year it's going to be a lot worse.
I don't disagree with you, Kevin. Let me just get through the general analysis. Bad news. Costs that we do not control drove us into cuts in budgeting practices that we prefer to avoid, right to your point. Not upgrading all equipment and vehicles that we normally would like, maintain the status quo, not fall behind. We usually purchase 2 police vehicles. That's a great thing to do. It's wise to do. You don't end up with repair costs. You don't end up with things breaking down and not serving the public the way we want to. Couldn't do it this year. We had to buy one. Not funding them out of the operating budget. Now, I will say this. I agree. This town has been wonderful about funding as much capital, if you will, as it can out of the operating budget, operating capital expenses. We do it with IT. We continued, I think our IT capital is still in the operating budget this year. We didn't pull that out. Our goal is to absolutely put that cruiser, Barbara and I just talked about that, the first thing we want to do next year, before anything, is the cruiser purchase goes back into the well, at least one. I don't know what next year will bring. I would like to buy 2 next year. We should. If we're only doing 1 this year, we really should. But at minimum, that one has to go back into the operating. But it's one of the first priorities of what we do, because I don't want to get into this practice. I will tell you, do other communities buy out of free cash these things? Yes. Is it a risk because you're always going to have to buy police cars? I don't disagree with you at all, Kevin. But it's what we had to do this year to make it work without putting more of a burden on the taxpayer or literally cutting services, because we would have to start cutting. And as many of you know, we have departments that are 1 director, 1 person, 1 admin, or 1 director only. We have combined finance and treasury departments. We have, so we are, and I'm not complaining about that. I think that's good and that's very efficient. But the reality is, at some point, you can only, the next place cuts go are staff. And I just don't see a lot of extra staff even where we do things, we bring in software. If I had a 4-person rec department, could I reduce it by bringing in more efficient software? Yeah.
You said only the labor was like at a cost of, which is good, it's only 2%.
Yeah,
You said that's not a
2%,
lot. That's
an
not a
increase
staff-
of
that's not a
2%.
staff
Labor
problem.
only went up 2%
That's
this
not a
year.
staff problem then. 2%'s low. Congratulations.
Yeah,
Good. You did it.
and even of the increase, of the whole 1.5 increase, it was 12%. And when you're in a service organization, that's actually a pretty good percent of your increase, only being 12.9 isn't a bad thing. But again, at some point, to make things work, what are our revenue streams? What do we do? And we don't want to put more burden on the taxpayer. So that police cruiser is a bone of contention for like Barbara, me, you, Kevin, everybody.
Can I ask a quick?
Yeah.
At the beginning, you had said our local aid only increased 0.6. What were we hoping for in terms of the increase?
Some years it's 1, some years it's 2. It depends if it's
percent?
chapter 70.
I mean, last
Because-
year, I mean, I would have to defer to the superintendent specifically on the details of Chapter 70 and the formula, but our Chapter 70, give me 1 sec.
Was that Chapter 70?
Chapter
You're
se-
talking about the
Chapter
0.6
70
increase?
So Chapter 70, so there's the 2 main components of our state aid are Chapter 70
Right.
and unrestricted aid. Our Chapter 70 only went up $62,000, $62,025. Our unrestricted aid went up $20,987. So that is very minimal. Last year, I believe our Chapter 70 went up $300 and something thousand. So Deb can speak more in detail regarding the Chapter 70 and how that works, but it has to do with, how much we get per pupil, and we barely got anything. So obviously, the cost of education went up more than $62,000 in 1 year. So very, very limited. It was definitely lower than what the numbers were last year. Do you have any insight on that?
Well, yeah, unfortunately, the Chapter 70 calculation is a class in itself that we could have any time, but it is a 2 or 3 hour class. And the calculations are partly the local community's contribution level. So they figure out the foundation budget for the schools, and then there's a deep calculation on how much each community should be able to target and pay towards that, the state funding the balance. That is a very old conversation we are not getting into tonight, Kevin Smith.
Okay.
Part of it is based on enrollment, so the student, and the Chapter 70 Barbara's talking about is specifically Sturbridge's Chapter 70, which was up last year because enrollment was up for students that we had actually temporarily. Those students are no longer, our enrollment is down a bit this year. We're very thankful for what we call hold harmless, because by state's calculation, they could say, well, now we actually should cut chapter 70 as opposed to do what all of our 5 communities and Tantascwa this year are in the minimum aid, which is $100 per student, which is pretty much nothing. But that's where Sturbridge is at.
So that was partially
Yes, that's
responsible
part-
for our
absolutely.
problem.
And the unrestricted was 20,000, which is effectively nothing.
How does timing of the budget cycle come in? Is this .6, the numbers you're talking about in your state aid projections, are they normal for this time of the year in the state budget cycle, and they get a little rosier as we get a few months down the road where we would normally start a budget process, or is this low numbers up front and we should continue to expect low numbers going forward?
We should continue to expect low numbers going forward. We use the governor's number every year when we are building the budget. Those are the numbers that we wait for. You know, we might see when the budget goes to Ways and Means and then Senate, maybe those numbers will go slightly up or down, but they're not going to make a difference to what we're talking about.
You know, and sometimes as we get closer with a later cycle, we're a little more confident. You start hearing some unofficial buzz of what's going to happen up at the legislature, and you relax a little bit. I don't think that even if there is some improvement once it gets to the state legislature, given the difference in what the Commonwealth has for surplus now compared to what it had prior, I don't envision that we're going to get, we certainly can't rely on it.
And we are not a town that historically gets large amounts of state aid. Our state aid percentage is low. And so, you know, we're not getting those windfalls. We're just not. You know, the bulk of our money comes from, unfortunately, the taxpayer. That's just the reality of how Sturbridge is. But just because you asked that question, I am going to say, not necessarily with the budget as far as the state budget, but the change in the town meeting date has been a very big challenge to provide a budget book by the first week of March, when a lot of the numbers that drive the budget don't become even available to us till the end of January, beginning of February. So that's been quite a challenge.
We didn't get the healthcare number till Tuesday officially.
And I was sharing
Last
with Kevin earlier today that, you know, if we want to go back and talk about, you know, 30-ish years ago, 25 years ago, whatever year the town meeting changed, but 30 years ago, you know, and I think, you know, Robin and Deb will back me up on this, used to get a state budget voted before December 30th. I'm sorry, June 30th. And now, you know, it could be July, August, September before we know what the state numbers are going to be. So years ago, the process used to flow along as we were building a budget. That actually Kathy also, because she's worked in the municipal world. It doesn't work that way anymore. There's no urgency to have a budget balanced and out to us before the fiscal year closes. So that's made it very challenging. The health insurance numbers don't get voted because we're part of Maya. Those don't get voted until the annual MMA meeting, which is at the end of January. The Worcester Regional numbers do not get voted. Those don't come out until January. That's a large portion. Back to the Maya, but the Maya, once the Board of Directors votes that percentage increase, the range, then it has to go to the actuaries to figure out what our range, what we should be getting. So that was February before that happened. So definitely a challenge having an April town meeting. I mean, obviously, it's the way things are here now, and we're going to work with it. But I just think realistically, this is going to be the schedule every year. It's going to be, we're just going to have to do things in a more condensed way and not have the ability to take as much time to making decisions to have an April town meeting.
And the blunt reality of this is I don't think the next 6 months are going to become more static from a budget perspective than Beacon Hill, just with all the things going on in the federal government. There's a lot of the Medicaid, all of these issues they're going to take a lot of state focus and state money. So But with that, Robin, let's keep wrapping up the bad news.
Keep going on my bad, no, I'm still.
I'm just gonna
Still on bad news, still on bad news.
throw myself out this
Listen, I'm
window.
ending with good news, whatever good news there is. After we went off on this police car issue, not funding our stabilization funds as we have done the past several years. Again, Sturbridge has just been phenomenal. When I came here, it was one of the most impressive things was looking at these stabilization funds and the history of funding them. Obviously, during COVID years, the town had to take a hit on that and then work to bring them back up. This year, we're using some of those stabilization funds. Some of them we're not funding quite as much as we were. We funded the capital stabilization, I think 100 instead of whatever we had done. We had 100.
No, capital, we're doing correctly.
Capital, no, which one did we drop?
So ambulance
Ambulance, because we actually
stabilization,
used, yeah.
we are
used
not
it.
funding $60,000, and fire stabilization,
fire.
we're not funding $100,000. And then the road budget.
That was one, the road budget, we reduced a little
We
bit.
reduced from
And I
155
want
to
to be,
100.
yeah, and I think what's good, needs to be clear on that is, it doesn't mean we're not going to pave as many roads. We have Chapter 90 money.
Right, so we still have, I did look for the meeting, we have almost $3 million still in Chapter 90 available to
Yeah.
us, and that's before our allocation for fiscal '26, which will be another 400.
Yeah, and the road
Something
paving analysis just came out. In fact, the board got it last week, I think. So we'll start moving forward on utilizing some of that money for paving and really offsetting what we didn't use in our stabilization and using that money as best as we can.
And kudos to our DPW for saving all that money repairing Cooper Road, because that would have drained a lot of
That was
Chapter
huge.
90 money.
That would have eaten up huge amounts of that.
That was terrific.
Thank you, yeah, and they got out there and did that and saved a tremendous amount of money. Because we were looking to try to scramble with ARPA money and all sorts of money to get that done. And then finally, utilizing some of our stabilization funds for the purchase of capital items, and again, as the cost of infrastructure and equipment increases. Next slide. Some good news, we did meet our goals outlined in our fiscal policy. We're not in trouble. We're not a town that's in distress. We're just a town that's in not quite as good of a shape as we have been. And we've been a little spoiled, frankly, with a lot of what we've been able to buy. We've talked about this, but we've been able to buy really nice things, and that's wonderful. I love that we have beautiful equipment. I love that everything looks wonderful. But like any household, some years are leaner than others, and some years you don't put as much money away in the bank, and those same years you just don't go out and buy the newest of everything, and you trim back a little bit so you can recoup. We had enough in our stabilization funds to appropriate these things without depleting services and without depleting the funds completely. So that's exactly what they're for. We avoid using free cash, and I know you could argue that a bit on whether or not police, but when I'm talking about the operating budget, we did not use free cash to buy small purchases, purchase of services, staffing. None of that was done through free cash. And despite a 16.7 increase in Worcester retirement and a 16% increase in healthcare, our annual budget increase actually matched last year's. Last year, our annual budget increase was 3.6%. The total annual, outside of the senior center debt exclusion, because that's a separate number. So we went up 3.6% on our annual budget last year. This year, our operating budget went up 3.6%. So so it's bad on the surface because we don't feel good. I think I'm speaking for Barbara too. We don't feel great about how we had to do it, but the increases were reasonable. The increases, we held the line on everything as best as we could. Next slide, Francis. And here's just a little comparison. In fiscal year '24, the overall budget increased 5%. In '25, less the senior center, 3.6%, and in '26, 3.6%. So we are trending the right way, and again, that means there's less turn back and all of those things that go with that, but that's okay. I mean, we're trending a good direction. We stayed stable. Our excess levy capacity is 0. This is a balanced budget, like just there. But our commitment for next year, Barbara and I are absolutely committed to this, barring any unforeseen circumstances like those fixed costs. If Worcester retirement goes back up to its normal 8 to 10%, if healthcare is able to stay at around 10 to 10, 11, 12%, and even if we can do better with looking at some plan design changes, we will budget to begin restoring stabilization funds utilized this year to restore those. Before we increase any purchases or we go out and we do anything, we want to shore up the stabilization. And the primary thing is to get things like that police cruiser or two back into the budget. I don't want to fall behind on things either. And we want to be sure that we can weather these challenges in the future. So that's why we don't want to get in the habit of using free cash for those large, which should be operating purchases. And we do want to shore up those stabilizations, because if you don't replace that ambulance stabilization fund, the next ambulance has nowhere to come from. So
Are ambulances and police cruisers and other type of vehicles going to also have to be electric under the current guidelines?
nothing we're hearing right now. Our cruises all fall within our green communities choices, the cruisers we have, and right now there is no push, as far as I know, on emergency service vehicles.
They were exempt from the law.
So with that, I welcome any questions. I want to thank you, and I also want to say that if there are members of the public watching, I'm always open to answering questions from anybody at any time. People can email me, people can Facebook message me. Again, I want to thank my directors. I know it was a tough year, and we were all over them about keeping things as lean as they could. And I want to thank you all for your time.
As far as measure, like 3.6% or fire department, what matrix do we use? What comparison? Is 3.6 good, not good? It's compared to what, us, to other towns, like towns? What do we use to say we're headed in the right direction, whether what department is, or out of line, or how does that work?
So I don't have hard comparisons with other towns. I tell you, I measure us against ourselves and against our own history a lot of times. What have we done? Are we improving? Are we tightening things down? Are we in line with where we need to do? I look at what we are maintaining for services. This 3.6 is 3.6, but not with budgeting that I'm thrilled with. Do we look at what other communities do? I can tell you, if you start looking around at other communities that have overrides, a significant number of communities do overrides for specific departments. It might be for public safety, it might be for schools. A lot of towns do overrides. Prop 2.5 is tough to live within the confines of the levy cap. It's good to have it, though, because it forces us to be tight and prudent on these things. I could get you some comparisons on what other towns do for increases.
My take is, I think we have a pretty good revenue stream with hotels and restaurants. I mean, it's a beautiful, amazing place. I came from a town with 10,000 people in Mass. We didn't have even one hotel. We had like maybe one restaurant.
Yep.
Now, the property values are higher, don't get me wrong,
Yep.
but having said that, I think we have a pretty good nugget of income and revenue for a town this size.
So
It's
our-
amazing, I thought,
Our
personally.
meals and hotel receipts that come back from the state, from what I looked, we are one of like the top 2 or 3 in the state percentage to budget of what we rely on for local meals. Now, one of the things that hit us this year is we've had dramatic increases in those over the past few years. This year, they're flat. They leveled out a bit. So that's why when our budget costs went up so much, but that remained flat, when we usually see increases at year over year on our meals tax particularly, it stayed a little bit flat. That's a number we couldn't tweak much higher. You know, we don't want to have a false number and end up in the red on the other end. But you're right, that's usually a huge driver. It's a much larger percentage of our budget. But that's where the betterment, a lot of the betterment stuff comes from that. That's the, some of the return that we get. So,
Because we're fortunate. Now you could say it puts more pressure on fire and police, and I agree, because you have more people coming to town, but out of state and the like, so I get that.
Yep.
But I don't think we've ever, talked about the percentage of people paying taxes versus the businesses. I don't know where we compare the rest of the state. I think maybe you just mentioned it. We're in an enviable
when it comes
position,
to
I
the
think,
state
here.
return receipts,
Nice.
yeah, we are. We do, for a small town,
Yeah.
we do well. And yes, there is, if you look at our population, we're 10,000, but we're not 10,000 certain weeks of the year and certain months of the year, certainly. And that's where our police and fire do have to offset. You're right. Are we lucky? We have some balance of development. We have the supermarket plazas, we have the Walmart. You know, there's tax revenue that comes in, the cold storage facilities bring in some tax revenue. So we have had some growth. The issue isn't that. The issue right now is that we've, I think, hit a point of almost build out on commercial area that's available. And again, a lot of this is the will of the town. What does the town want to develop? What does the town not want to develop? We don't necessarily, the fiber of this town is not to be a hugely commercial town. We don't want multiple downtown strips, let's say. But most of what we have in large commercial development, I think Jean's here, we don't have a lot of areas to grow that. So yes, we have revenue coming in from those. It's a steady stream coming in, and it's a good revenue. But that revenue isn't necessarily increasing because we've hit build out. Where we would see increase to offset some of these budget creeps is if we had major new growth coming in. But there's not a lot of place for major new commercial or industrial
The
growth.
population's not growing either, is it? Am I mistaken? It's been
No,
pretty
the
flat for a while.
population grew a little, but not much, but the budget grows, these things that we talked about that went up, for instance, the Worcester retirement, or the healthcare, or even just general costs of everything, materials, services, all those things go up. But if what we're getting coming in is staying pretty steady,
I'm saying services outside of the state, the labor, if you said the labor went up, I'd say, like, I get it, but it's not. But if population doesn't grow, services outside of inflation should stay relatively the same, right?
well, they are, we haven't, so they are in the sense that we haven't added staff, we don't grow those departments, let's say. We've added a little bit to public safety, that's the only places over the past few years we've really added. And in fact, like I said, we reduced overall staff by 1 full-time equivalent. But it's not, it's the general budget costs that go up, the labor costs go up 2%. Or even if they go up 3%, that's sort of normal in a community, 2 to 3% labor costs on contractual increases. You see but as I said, you see the retirement cost goes up 16%, the healthcare goes up 16%. That has to get offset by something. The tax revenue coming in, and we don't have a separate commercial rate, nor should we, it'd be risky for a town this size. But the taxes that are coming in, with the Prop 2.5 levy cap, we don't get more from those people every year. Once you're a build-out, you're getting what you're getting, plus the Prop 2.5 increase. So our pot can only go up 2.5%, the total pot. And unless we were developing more, or building more and bringing in new growth, you're not going to see that pot, because it's 2.5 on the total levy. So
That's why it's so important for efficiencies and find ways to do more
keep
with
trying.
less. That's
we're trying.
that's the key, isn't it? Either you grow, like Kevin was saying earlier, pretty much for business, you grow the top line, and that's good, and you can't do that, then you gotta reduce the bottom line and cost, and you try to do it through efficiencies. I mean, that's what you really want, you know?
Can I interject for a minute? We've been very generous with our TIFs over the years with businesses coming in. And sometimes even when a business didn't really necessarily need a TIF. I can think of at least one where, anyway. Are some of those coming to an end? Are we halfway through some? I apologize, I don't know if you have that. In the past,
Ann was just working on it the
Oh,
other
okay,
day.
because that would be useful for us to be able to look at. Because it's,
2 years left on the 21 New Boston Road.
okay.
The two cold storages, they're only in the
Those are new. And they were all financed coming in. I kind of almost regret my vote on that one.
to go on both of those
Right.
cold storages, and they only go up 10% each year.
And the new, the Holiday Inn Express is probably halfway.
I got 2 years left.
Oh, 2 years, oh, I thought we had,
New Boston Road.
oh, okay.
And the Noble.
Okay, and that would be really helpful if we had some kind of memo that showed that. Is it, can I ask Ann or Barbara?
No.
This, or you?
Public House Hotel, they're still on their tip. They've got about 2 to 3 years left.
Is new growth not reflected until they start paying down their TIF? In other words, so every year, how does that work? So every year, their TIF is going down. It's the biggest in year one, and then it works its way down to nothing after, most of them are 10-year TIFs, right? So are we only getting to see growth in terms of the amount of taxes that they've given? Is that,
Basically, what it is it's the value. Okay,
Right.
So we come up with the total value of what it's worth when it's 100% complete.
yeah,
Then the first year, they had 0%.
right, but would that show zero growth for that?
Guys, so first of all, if we're gonna have this conversation, we're gonna have you come up to the mic, Ann, because we cannot have a back and forth with
Sorry.
for the people at home, it's inappropriate.
Do you understand what my question is, though, Ann?
So
Okay.
why don't we, and could you just please kind of take it from the
Okay.
top?
Okay, so the TIF, when a TIF gets put into place, it's set up for the 10-year TIF.
Right.
Once that building is 100, so we get nothing out of it until it's 100% complete. Once it's at 100% complete, we have the total value of what it's worth, and then starts the TIF clock. So the first year, we get 0 growth. Okay, it's 100% complete, but we get 0 growth. The next year, we get 10% of what that total growth, total value would be, and 10% each year. So we're getting 10% of growth on those buildings
That's what I
each
thought.
year.
So
for the
let's
10
say,
years.
just
Instead
hypothetically.
of getting it all at once.
Right, so say hypothetically, we had 5 new commercial developments go in, and we gave them all a TIF. We would show 0 growth.
The first year.
The first year, even if we put up 5 hotels and a factory in this, because we gave a full TIF for that year 1. And we're only going to show growth that's reflected in how much of the tax is coming in.
Of the value. Right, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
which equates into the tax.
Right. I always go value,
what
not
their
taxes,
taxes
yeah.
are. Okay, so sometimes, because people will ask, well, we had a new hotel, we had this, but
Right.
we've been very generous with TIFs. And, you know, maybe that's something that we need to take a
And
look
each
at.
TIF
in
was
the
a little
future.
different.
No, I know,
Now
but-
we're back to
Used to
the
be-
last couple of TIFs we've done has been the 10-year at 10% each year. Well, 0% the first year and then 10% for the next 9 years. The other ones, like the
there's a-
hotel one, it was,
Question from the board.
So Mary, the other side of that is, you probably would have had 0 growth anyway, because without the TIF to have that parcel developed, you probably wouldn't have developed it, or had it developed at something else. So there is some value that you're getting
of
at
course.
growth you
I mean, and
otherwise
I-
wouldn't have. And we're only talking about real estate taxes. Some of these things will have personal
Personal
property
property taxes.
taxes. We go back to, we may be fully built out, but you can look at redeveloping a parcel to a different business that maybe the real estate taxes are the same, but they bring in, sophisticated machinery and equipment, you get a bump in
and that's
personal
100%. The
property
personal
taxes.
property tax
So
is
you
not
get
part of the
that in
TIF.
there.
No, no,
And
I
when you
get
talk
it.
meals, we were talking jobs, hopefully for some members of the community, and you're getting the hotel meals taxes for some of those. So there is growth that we're getting from those.
Well,
It's
no,
just a
I
little
understand that,
slower
but
in some
there,
cases.
but, no, I'm following you,
Mm-hmm.
but some TIFs some have shown more need than others that we have given over the years, that's all.
Well, there's an actuarial sweet spot in it.
Yeah.
And so there's a point where they're bringing in a certain amount of things, but then are they taking a lot of police and fire, and then what are their impacts on water and sewer, and and then never mind traffic and all these other things. So it's not a, yes, TIF's good, yes, no, TIF's bad, and never mind, the state, I think, initiates the whole process, doesn't it?
Well, the whole thing too is, a lot of times the reason a town gives a TIF is because then they qualify for state funding.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I get it, but we've
So
been
it's more-
very generous
it's
with
more-
our
I
TIFs,
know,
that's
what
all I'm saying.
is, it's more lucrative to them on the state side than necessarily, but if, without the TIF at the local level, they're not eligible for the state funding that's available to them.
But Ann, I had a question, it's kind of splitting hairs. The value of the property that's getting the TIF, that value is not static for the 10 years.
No.
So that value can be inching up based on its general value with the market. So that 10% we get the
Right.
first year might be 10% of a bigger number than it would have been the year before.
Exactly, yeah.
because
If
of
the
that-
commercial properties go up 2%, that value's gone up
But
2%,
year
so
10, when
it
you're
is a
getting
little
100%,
different.
you might be getting 100% of 2 times the value it was when the TIF began. I'm
Yes,
just saying
yes and
theoretically.
no, but you got the little depreciation then over
Right,
those
right,
10
right.
years
But
too,
that's going to
factoring
be,
in.
the
right.
base is going to be
Right.
going up continuously.
And then, I guess the good thing about the TIF is you're getting a little bit of growth each year instead of getting 1 year with this big hunk of new growth for your budget that year, and then next year you have no new growth from that. So by spreading it out, you're constantly adding to the new growth on each budget instead of getting one big lump sum in one budget year.
Yeah, but
You're
then.
gonna get that lump sum every year.
Right, but what I'm saying is if you didn't, I'm saying if you, no, I'm saying if you didn't do the TIF, if those 2 cold storage facilities didn't have a TIF, we would have gotten a lot of new growth in that one fiscal year for the budget. And it would have been great, we got all this new growth. But then next year, you don't get anything from them. You get taxes from them,
Right,
but
that's
you
all.
get no new growth from them.
But I think, but the point of it is, it's that there is a duration point in a TIF conversation that is a valid one. Because 10 years, it can, because the point is, yeah, you might not be incentivizing growth if you don't do something and they're not getting state funds. But by the same token, 10 years is a while. And it is a very generous thing that a lot of businesses would like to
And
have.
it's up to the
that other
town.
businesses in towns don't get. And when, people look at the property taxes and so I think we're all
Right.
singing
But
from
it's up
same
to the
hymn book.
town, too, what to do. I mean, we've had a couple TIFs that have been 5-year TIFs.
Sure.
And it's been a
Yeah, no.
20% increase each year, so it's up to
Right, no,
the
I
town
know,
that
I
does
know.
that.
Just-
That's the point she's making.
That is the point I'm
You
trying
guys
to
Yeah.
get to do that.
So I think we're.
Jamie did it better, but yes, that's. the
Nah,
point I'm
just
trying to
because
make.
I am, I got to listen to all your smart ideas and then steal them. All right, so moving through that, okay. Anything else on this?
So before everybody leaves, I just want to make sure that everyone, especially FinCom, had an opportunity to read the actual departmental budget overview, and if you have any questions on that, all the department heads are here tonight. And then also, and Robin did highlight probably 80% of those changes. And then particularly on the capital improvement plan, if you all want to just turn to that section of the budget book. Again, if there's any questions, there is on page F7, the actual chart with what we are going to be funding through the capital plan. And if there are any questions on that, again, I'd like the department heads to have an opportunity to respond. Because again, I'm in the interest of trying to move you all forward as you review everything. And if not, that's all that I have.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Anything else? from you
I
guys?
do have, so, one of the nice things about what we see with this budget is all of the kind of safety mechanisms we've been putting in place for a long time, the having free cash balances, having stabilization funds, are working for this fiscal year because it's giving us that bridge. But the drumbeats have been getting louder about, are we starting to spend more than we're taking in? Because I know Barbara's been pointing it out, and we've pointed it out in our book several times over the last 8 to 10 years, that we're getting very close to spending more than we earn. And this year, we're covering it, and we're covering it without costing us too much, but it seems like we're at that tipping point where, next year, if we get another 16% increase from Worcester or in another 20% increase from our Maya, we're going to be looking at cutting services. We're not, because the revenue is not going up. Even though the number looks great as a number, it's not going up to cover the costs.
Yeah, absolutely, and I will say but in defense of sort of seeing this coming, and Barbara has, you look at her projections, has been warning about this, the FY '23 increase, if I recall, was 7%. So we're trying, we didn't get ahead of it this year because of what happened with Worcester Retirement and Maya. I think we actually, had that not happened, and had that extra 400,000 or 500,000 not hit us, we would have been able to weather that better, and maybe that 3.6 wouldn't have been a problem because we still would have been able to not do the things we don't want to do. But to your point, we can only do this a year. We can't keep doing this. That's what these years are for. That's what these stabilizations are for. But if you look at the trend of, it was 7 and change in FY '23, then it was 5 in FY '24, and then 3.6, 3.6. 3.6 increase on the budget with Prop 2.5 typically is not so bad.
No, it's reasonable.
It is reasonable, but
We're not getting 3.6% increases in revenue.
Let's be frank about everything, though. The federal government bailed this town out in 2020, was it 2? Yeah, 21, I guess was, with all the ARPA money. Without the 4 million, 6 million in ARPA we received, we were in a major budget shortfall. So I think I don't say that to counter your point, Kevin. I guess the tension is that we are, everything you're saying, I think is correct. I think it's the tension point we have is with all we have a couple of major capital projects coming down the turnpike that probably have to be done, and I'm not sure, like the DPW, you know what I mean? It's like, so that's the hard part about it, right? Because it's like, it's because we kind of, and I do think things are going to, I think we're going to have a pretty wild next 6 months, to be honest. I don't know, but it does seem like things are not going. So part of it is, I just, why we appreciate all the department heads here tonight, because this is, it's a tense time, and we need you all to be smarter, better, and faster. But by the same token, some things have to happen, are gonna have to happen. Some things, you will see how we do it within the circumstance we're in. But with it all, and kind of with a nod to, it's late and you're all here, we do really appreciate you. So that's all, I just wanted to say that.
And just on to your point, what you have to look at is, Robin highlighted on the expense side, what was going on. But you have to also look at the state of the economy right now. So if you look at meals tax, I only put that up $15,000. Room occupancy tax is level for what we budgeted in '25. Less disposable income for people. People don't go on vacation, they don't stay in hotels, they don't go out to eat because they're trying to cover their bills. So we have to look at this kind of was a perfect storm again with the economy, these high costs that we got. The health insurance had to do with shifts on the federal level, which if somebody wants to talk about that later, I'm not doing it now. But, a lot of that stuff caused things to happen this year that hopefully we're not going to see next year. And hopefully we all hope that prices stabilize and continue to stabilize, which will then show next year that our room occupancy will go back up to, where it normally is as increasing every year. Same thing with meals. So I think that we are in good shape. It isn't all doom and gloom, but we do need to proceed cautiously, would be
With that in
my.
mind, why didn't we go to any given year, and we're all in this together, right? We all live here. Why not, at that point, knowing all this, why don't we go to the departments and everyone and say, hey, roll up your sleeve this year, don't tell us what you need, we gotta cut 2% for a year. Why is it always?
Because it's services, so it's like, you can't say that to the special education department or the water and sewer department to not do X, Y, and Z. You can do it in a more deliberate fashion around other departments that we view as other, more, more.
Less essential than
Yeah,
some
less
others.
essential, but at the staffing level we're running that at, that is a layoff, that are a reduction in force.
Service, I just wanna say, what if, and come back, and what can you do? And special services, can't touch it like, like the rails we have in regular federal, right? But let's roll up our sleeves and try.
So
Not say, here's
effectively,
800,000 and we cut it from this, and that's good, because we cut it, that's.
I'll tell you, Ken, in theory, that's great, but I will tell you that a lot depends on, and not that one department's more important than the other, if you will, but some departments have the room to cut and some don't, because some have been cut before and some have not. So taking 20 out of the police budget is a certain percentage of cut. Taking 25 out of the fire overtime budget is a certain percentage of cut. If you look at each department, you'll see some departments actually went down. They did take cuts. If you look, so what I would ask you to do is go through that detail budget, and you'll see, so instead of it being across the board, everybody's gonna cut 2%. I'm uncomfortable with that, because some years, some departments can do it, other years, they can't. It depends on what they need in a certain year. If they have a software license that's coming due, and they have to pay for that software license, and I say cut that, they can't, or else we lose that software, and now we're not efficient. So I'm not comfortable with saying to people, everybody's gonna take the haircut.
Not to say everybody, just
Well, but-
think about it.
Right, but what we did pretty much when we got that $815,000 gap is we went back to everybody and said, literally sent an email and said, go through your budgets, and we need to know what you absolutely do not need, and pull it out. And as I said, I'd like in theory saying everybody's gonna cut 2%, everybody's gonna cut 3%, but it just doesn't always work. So we went through with those department heads, and you'll see in some of these departments, and it might have only been, we looked and said, okay, this is a $500 travel budget. You know what? This department there's one mandatory conference every year. It costs them $300. We have an extra $200. Let's get that $200 out of there. I mean, literally down to that level is where we were at.
And you're not.
And we should be.
And you're not seeing that. So,
Right.
if there was things that were asked for, and when we talked to departments and they came back and they said, you know what, we can defer that till next year, or, we can lower this, you're not going to see any of that. So for us to get from an $815,000 budget gap to the point where we are, there was a lot of give and take from departments. And there was also, we looked at, as Robin said, funding some of the salary for the Board of Health manager or director out of revolving funds. We also, recreation, we're funding $10,000 out of the revolving account for the summer rec program, because we can do that, because we have those funds. So we have started to look at things a different way, where in the past we may not have done that. So it does help us to take a second look, come back with different ideas. And also when Robin holds her staff meetings, I mean, one of the conversations, at one of the meetings was, okay, look, we need to cut. And then one person starts saying, okay, well, maybe I can look at this. And then another person is like, oh, wait a second. Maybe we can do that different too. So we do all that. You're just seeing the final product, but a lot happens between the time a first budget is given to the point where you receive the bound book.
I guess where I was going is sort of to Jamie's point, right? Next year, fiscal year '27, you look at the capital expenses that are lined up there. They're not even new buildings, but I mean, the fire department needs 2 new trucks at $2.3 million. You know, so I mean, that's revenue you need in fiscal year '27.
And that's why the stabilizations have to start getting refunded, because.
And I agree, and that's right, but you need to, that's where you need to be cognizant of what's coming down in the line in the future, and I'm just saying that. In general, you have to look out and say, okay, next year, just one department needs $2.3 million in capital, and, you know, and things like that.
And absolutely, and I do also want to say that one of the things is that we are, so while there were some budget practices in here that we're not thrilled with, like those 2 vehicles particularly, the bus and the police car, what we didn't do was, to make this work, we did not inflate revenues and gamble.
Right.
And I think that's really important. I mean, we may have tweaked here and there. We might have said, can we go up 3,000 here, 4,000, you know, negligible money. But we were very careful, because that's more dangerous than even what we did. What we did isn't really dangerous, it's just not great practice, and we can't continue to do. It becomes dangerous if it's a pattern. But if we had played with the revenues to close that, so we made the decision to do this very obvious, okay, pull the police cruiser out, as opposed to, well, you know, well, let's tweak a little bit on the revenue and hope the economy gets better and people start spending more money at restaurants. You know,
No, I applaud that too. I think that conservative
But I think that's
approach
the
is
side people
best.
need to see too,
Yeah.
that so it's not as doom and gloom, because those numbers could come in better. It's possible, but we're not.
But
betting on
also,
that.
all of us have access in the department heads to their capital
Yes.
outlays for the future, what 5 years look, you know, the plan looking down the road, that the public doesn't have. And you have to look, like, the DPW department needs a major overhaul in their facilities down there.
The gas
That's not
station,
gonna
the
be
tank,
cheap.
all those things that are unexpected that came up. Yeah.
But we're gonna get through it. And so with that, we'll figure it out. So with
We're a good
that,
team of
I do
people.
want to let everybody go home, all the staff go home if we can, because it is a lot.
Everybody, thank you guys.
Unless you guys have anything else, I'm not
Yes.
trying to end it. I wasn't trying to dismiss them.
Well, we're not done, we'll go in the back room.
Okay, I think we just have a citizens forum if there's anybody from the community.
Yeah, actually, that would be good to, if anyone has any
That's why we
comments.
kind of wanted to make sure our meeting was still open.
I don't think there's anybody here who's in the department.
Everybody looks like they're leaving. Thanks, Kevin.
I said we're more aggressive in the right direction. I think some of this was good. The discussion was good, I thought.
Okay. Meeting two?
Yeah, we're just wrapping this. So does anybody, citizens forum, anybody from the community? Jeff, Joanna? Okay.
They're gonna go back there, yeah.
Now they're gonna want your mic.
Mr. Shapiro, how are you, sir?
Hello, everyone. Jeff Shapiro, 50 Westwood Drive. First off, thank you, everyone, for your hard work, diligence, for the budget, everything like that.
Guys, silencio, por favor.
Gracias.
I'm sorry, but they get it. Go ahead, Jeff.
So I wanted to thank everyone for their diligence and everything with the budget. Excellent job. I know I've brought it up a couple times to various members. I feel like one of the biggest concerns I have as a citizen paying taxes and everything is, and I appreciate the fact that, Mary, that you brought up the TIF situation. I hate to even bring it up that much longer because I know it's a tough situation, but we have given TIFs out to various companies, and I feel as though we are not taking advantage of the resources that we're supposed to be having. We gave a TIF out, as we mentioned, to the hotel, Holiday Inn Express, and with the expectations that we were going to have certain amenities in town, i.e. a bank, a restaurant, whatever. They had the blueprint set up for it, and then for whatever reason, it fell out. This business is getting a TIF. They're not paying their taxes on it, like up to the amount that we should be getting, which is obviously hurting our budget a little bit. Whether it be the hotel tax that they're not paying full taxes on, the restaurant tax that we're not having a restaurant there for, and the land tax, the property tax, the restaurants that's not there. Obviously, there's a bunch of businesses that aren't there. So I really don't know how to go about this, but I really want to have some of these businesses that are given TIFs to be held accountable for the fact that they're not holding their end of the bargain.
So I think statutorily that's difficult. I think, if my understanding of it's correct, and I don't disagree with substantively, I see exactly what you're saying. I think that if I understand how TIFs work, is that the state authorizes it initially as point of application, and then it comes through and we authorize the same, and then we're basically entering into a contract with them to defray their taxes, and then they get additional funding from them. So I don't know that there's a short of altering the tax code itself. I don't really see how, Raman, am I right about this? Yeah. I don't think there's like a mechanism for it. It's more about that initial, I think it's that threshold conversation where you're like, okay, well, this business brings in, it's kind of a numbers thing at some level. And sometimes I think Mary, I think you were saying, we got a little rubber stampy on some of them perhaps.
Personally, I think that we were getting a little too generous. It was like automatic, okay, I'll set up,
And I think the question of them complying with the terms of their TIF is what Mr. Shapiro is getting at. So you have the terms of the TIF, you're supposed to hire so many people by so many days. And I know that the state does, so for example, we went and supported the Public House because they were supposed to hire so many people for their state TIF. And because nobody could find help, they had trouble. They made every effort. We argued that we still supported them being able to continue to get, this was a state TIF, that they could continue to get their state TIF because they had made a good faith effort. And they're a good partner for the town, and they had tried. But if they had, we certainly wouldn't have written a letter of support when they said they were supposed to get jobs, and they don't create jobs. In this case, it wasn't that they didn't create the jobs, they just couldn't fill the jobs. So I think the question of whether or not there are mechanisms to follow up and ensure that they're fully compliant, but to the chair's point, the state has the input on this. But I'm happy to look at a little more detail on what leverage we have if they're not fully compliant on what they promise.
Is there a particular property you're concerned about?
Also, there's that, just getting back to that quickly. So there's that, but also, of course, no, I just lost my train of thought there, but yes, I would like to.
Hiring locally.
Also, it's hiring, it's the hiring.
We have a list of criteria that we use to determine whether or not we want to give a TIF, right? And we have that policy, and I'm sure you've looked at it, and it's, how many employees do you think you'll be able to hire? And will you hire locally? And, do you have the ability to pay without this TIF? Would you still be able to come without the TIF? And so I know what you're saying. You go through the checklist. You want to call them on it if some of the reasons that we chose them to have a TIF, they're not fulfilling their end of the bargain. And that's what Jamie said. Now we're tied in with the state. But I personally am, for the next one, going to take a much closer look. Because I think we have given some TIFs where the business was coming anyway. They had their financing lined up. And I am thinking about, for example, cold storage. And now I voted for the TIF, so I have to. But, when they came before us, and I think it was Terry that negotiated the TIF. I think it was one of his very first ones, or it might have been our old town. But they came and they were fully financed. They already had their bank, and they were all set. And, I was sitting here thinking, well, you're coming regardless, I'm not sure you really need a TIF.
Yeah.
So it was supposed to be somewhat need-based.
Yeah, I don't remember it that way
I
at all.
I do. They were very well
Well,
funded.
the town meeting votes on the TIF. We
Right,
put it in
yes,
front
we
of the
make-
town,
yeah.
so we don't make that decision. But at town meeting, that was brought up.
Yes.
And I believe it was Craig Moran from the audience said, "Look, we've negotiated in good faith, like, let's continue to do that." And the town voted the TIF, knowing they were coming anyway.
Yeah.
And with the hotel, I don't disagree with you, but the bank and the restaurant are excluded from the TIF. It was just the Holiday Inn. It was not the surrounding buildings we're getting.
Could have sworn that in the language there was something about how, when they were coming in, it was going to be a hotel. It was going to be just like the.
Correct.
Cracker Barrel. Where it was
Correct.
going to be a hotel,
Yep.
a restaurant, and a
100%.
bank or whatever it was.
100%.
We were told it was going to be that.
You're right.
You're
Now
right.
it's just a hotel, a Panera, which is great. We have another building that's attached to that that's not being used. And we have a dirt spot, which is currently being used as a truck stop. I go there every single day to Panera. And every single day I go there, there's always a truck or two or three sitting in there. A, it's detracting from our town values. That's not a truck stop.
Sure.
We have truck stops in town. Secondly, it's a dirt spot, which looks horrible.
First
And we're
of all,
not
you
getting
should be-
any
you should be
taxes or
Going
anything.
to the local coffee
I'm just-
shops, but that's
yes.
a different conversation.
Yeah.
But that's.
No, you're right.
I was just teasing you.
My argument was only the hotel was part of the TIF. That's.
So it's the initial building and then. it
But also
goes
the,
other
the
buildings.
sales taxes, the employees that could have been there, the restaurant taxes we could have been taking in, because we're talking about how we have this, we're not making as much money, budgetarily speaking, as much as we're spending out. But we're losing on these things because we don't have these
Well-
businesses that we're supposed to be having.
But let's step back
Yeah,
from the
but that's-
conversation we just had. Our bad year was being slightly below our free cash cap. Most communities kill for that. So it's the tension of the points that we're having is in this meeting, and sometimes this meeting is there's a lot of it's spirited, let's put it that way. And it's because of these type of conversations, that's how we improve these policies. And and I think the query's right to, make sure there's compliance with any, conditions on it. But, some of it, the horse is out of the barn on the previous ones. And on an inflow and an outflow, I don't know that TIFs are, it's complicated, right? But I do think that, to Mary's point, if they're coming in.
I'm just gonna look a little closer.
To answer your question that you were starting to ask, Jamie.
Yeah.
What properties, obviously, the Panera hotel property is one. The second one I was going to mention would be the Noble Station, because
There's no tip on that.
we did look at, and there is some sort of a TIF either on that property or the property adjacent to it.
I think the tip
For
would
the
be
EV
on
station.
if the EV station gets built, that's a different.
Okay,
was a
so that
different-
was like
that's a
the
different-
truck stop, I guess.
Well, the truck stop is the Noble itself. I don't believe there's a tip on the Noble. I think the tip, if I recall, was on the building of the EV, which right now is not, it's not in process.
Sure.
That wouldn't kick in until that actually got built and then.
Okay.
But I think what's important too is how they're negotiated, and it's a larger question than tonight, but these are all these 10, 10, 10 over 10 years. I kind of like where you might be 10 the first year, but then it jumps incrementally until you get to 100% sooner, so that you're getting more money. Yes, you want to give that business a chance to get on its feet, it's just opened up. Because I do look at the offsetting, that all the personal, the tangible taxes that come out of that cold storage, for example, there's a lot of equipment in there, and we make a lot of money from taxes
Oh,
on
no
that
doubt.
equipment. Now, would I, just my personal, this is just Robin's take on TIFs. I'm always happy to be getting more money for a property than what I would have been getting. And I think it was Jim or somebody brought up the fact that the property value goes up anyway, so 10% of what becomes a larger number every year. But I do think that spreading out 10 for 10 years is a little slow. And Ann is right, you get this one lump sum of growth, but then it goes into the property levy the next year, so you only go 2.5 on it. Whereas if you have a little bit every year, it stops you from getting into a trap of seeing this big bump and overspending. And I've seen towns do that. They get $1 million in growth one year, and then the next year they're down to 200,000. And now it's almost like a structural deficit because they're thinking that way. And they budget using that money that year. But I prefer TIFs that go maybe a shorter duration, like 6 or 7 years, where they're ramping up faster. So you give them that 10% the first year. You give them that slack the first year to get up and running, because they are still paying for all that equipment that's come in, and that's good money. But as that property tax value increases over the years, as taxes, as everything goes up, then you're at 20%, then you're at maybe 35%, then maybe you're at 50% sooner than a 10-year span. I like to see the money come in a little faster.
Yeah.
Conceptually, I like the TIF. I like what we get for that equipment on that cold storage. I don't want to pick on one business, but let's face it, that's a lot of expensive equipment in there, very expensive equipment. That's great money for the town with a low-impact business. Not a lot of extra traffic. Yes, it's trucks in and out, but they're right off the highway. So there's a case where you look at a business, they might have been fully financed, so you say, well, they really didn't need it, they were coming anyway. But if the state is looking at that as part of its larger economic development picture, and that's the partnership that the town would have, would I like something maybe more than 10-10-10? Yeah, but do I still think it was a worthwhile thing for us to do?
Oh, I'm not
as a town?
doubting
Yeah,
that.
I do.
It just, it shouldn't, we have a policy that we use. And one aspect is, would they be able to come in, do we need to provide an incentive to come, or would they have come anyway? And personally, if a business would have come anyway, then I think they should pay their full tax year one. If they can't, then that's a whole different story. You're trying to draw in business. You want them to choose Sturbridge over Charlton, for example. But if you don't need it, if you're a Amazon coming in, then no, I'm not in favor of. Anyway.
On that note, I would just ask
anything
two
else?
things,
Okay.
just two things of this. Right. Number one, if we could look into the writing to see if there's anything to hold them accountable for. The second thing is, in the future, when we are handing out or voting on TIFs, to have something in writing specifically saying that if they do not hold up to their end of the bargain, that their TIF either detracts or something happens that they're responsible for paying X amount if they're not reaching certain expectations. Just because then there's a way to really keep them in check.
Yeah, we should
I
be
just
doing
feel like
compliance
that's-
audits.
If we're able to.
Yeah,
If we're able
Because
to.
sometimes they'll
That's
promise, we'll bring
statutorial.
in, we anticipate hiring 10 employees. And so that's one of the reasons that you grant the TIF, because they're going to employ more people. And then if they don't employ anybody, it would be nice to be able to go back and renegotiate the TIF. And I think Robin's going to look into whether we can legally do that.
And what the reasons are that they didn't comply. There might have been, like with the public house one, there was a very clear
like a
reason
hardship
why they didn't
situation.
comply. And it
So-
was okay, yeah.
So, no, I appreciate it.
I appreciate all your effort, everything, your responses, everything like that. And
Nah, well, we think
I
you're
yield the floor
a
back.
troublemaker, and you gotta get out of here, guy. Thanks, very much
That's a
appreciated.
good thing.
All right, with that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Wait a second.
You got it in before you left.